Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. It's another Friday bonus episode because everything lined up. It was David Cronenberg's birthday on Tuesday, my guest Seth Smith's new film Tin Can drops on VOD today, and Seth picked The Fly. So here we are. Seth is a filmmaker based in Halifax. His movies include Low Life and The Crescent, and you might also know him as part of the band Dog Day. His latest feature, Tin Can, is a trippy thriller starring Anna Hopkins as a researcher trying to stop a fungal pandemic that threatens all humanity, only to wind up trapped in a mysterious isolation pod and forced to figure out how to survive. Seth picked another movie about pods, The Fly, Cronenberg's groundbreaking 1986 remake of a gimmicky 50s film about a scientist who swaps body parts with a housefly in a teleportation experiment gone horribly wrong. Things are even more horrible in this version, since Jeff Goldblum's genius Seth Brundle is hybridized on a cellular level, slowly, painfully mutating into something entirely new, destroying both his body and his newfound relationship with the journalist Ronnie Quaife, played by Gina Davis, who was Goldblum's real-life partner at the time. It's monster movie as operatic tragedy, and Cronenberg's rigid focus on the central couple as things go from bad to worse to truly, truly awful, makes The Fly feel like the most personal of horror stories. I think that's why it's a classic. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It's definitely a movie that I watched when I was very young, and it did stick with me over my whole life. And even today, I would consider it, one of my favorite films. So when you asked me what film it was definitely one of the top few that came to mind. And I was also, I'm promoting a new film, and which kind of has some similarities as The Fly, and there's some parallels. And although I don't think it was like a direct influence when I was writing or making it, it's interesting to, I was looking for kind of similar minded films, and it was interesting to think about how much of The Fly kind of leaked in. Like, I have a small fly inside me right now.
Yeah.
And I always will, possibly. So, yeah.
When you chose it, I suddenly saw the connection, just in the most literal sense, in that it's about people becoming something else, and also there are pods. But I don't know that anyone who doesn't know that going in will see it, which I think is the best kind of influence, where it's just viral or it's in the DNA. It's a Brundle fly.
Yeah, right. That was one thing the one thing I referred to The Fly when I was filming Tin Can, as I said. I know I have these kind of pod shaped, captivity, these containers and I just make sure that those don't look like The Fly containers.
Yeah. Well, and Cronenberg very famously said that he wanted them to look like Ducati motorcycle cylinders, that it's an upside down Ducati.
Yeah, he was kind of a motorcycle fan at the time.
I think he still is. He just doesn't talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
Engines and machinery have always been a thing for him.
Okay, right. Beautiful machines, anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm stunned that no one has picked The Fly before now. This is like episode 380 something, and it's never come up. But that movie it's a part of my DNA too. It's been, I live in Toronto. It was shot here. For 13 years, I was around the corner from Kensington Market, where they shot the scene where they buy where he buys Ronnie he buys Ronnie the bracelet.
Okay.
And I've seen the props, and I've walked through that world over and over and over again. I think I still do. I had the script, an early draft of the script, which I found back when Hollywood Canteen was still a thing on the Danforth selling screenplays. I found the draft with the monkey cat sequence and the and the extra arm, like all the stuff that was shot and cut, and just it taught me how to read movies in a weird way. Like Back to the Future came out a year earlier, and that was my film school. I just went every week, took someone else and watched it and broke it down in my head. Yeah. And but then The Fly made it all real, in that, you can make a movie here in Toronto that's about something, and it isn't just an exploitation picture. And the more I saw it, but also I guess it came out like the week I turned 18. So the preview, the press screening was actually 2 days before, and I had to lie about my age to get in.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I definitely wasn't. Yeah, I was underage when I watched it. It was, I think I didn't watch it when it first came out, but I rented it as a VHS, I think. And
Mhm.
I kind of had a deal with my babysitter would just rent whatever I wanted. So it was cool. But
So you're
no, but
really young.
yeah, but it was inspiring in a lot of ways. Yeah, the Canadian aspect's really cool. And, now I'm very, influenced by that and I'm sure I think he got a lot of pushback in those days, because horror movies were a lot different, they're less sophisticated than they are today, and it's a pretty, it stands out from the rest of the kind of B movies of that time, not
Oh
that
yeah.
it's a B movie, but when you're comparing it to like, yeah, Critters or I don't know, whatever,
Oh yeah. No.
whatever was in the video store.
Yeah, it
um,
certainly could have been a B movie. I mean, I think
yeah,
that was maybe Fox's plan,
right.
to have a monster movie with a doomed romance, and then Cronenberg comes along and turns it into. And I remember the first notes of Howard Shore's score, and you're just like, oh, this is an opera. Like, this is serious. It's taking itself
Right.
deadly seriously, and then it turns out, oh yeah, it's a movie about cancer. It's a movie about losing yourself to a disease and losing someone and more to the point, watching someone you love lose themselves to a disease. It's just
It was for me it was because I was watching all these other things at the time that were a lot more shallower, in terms of story, and for me it really had an impact on me because it was kind of cool for me. I was really into monsters as a kid, and to see a kind of a creature as kind of the main character of a film, it was kind of special, but also just how sad it was at the end.
yeah.
It was a very heavy, dark film, and that you just really feel bad for the thing, whereas like typical movies are just it's about killing the monster and saving everyone, and it had a very unusual hero kind of character too. I mean, aside from Gina Davis's role, there was that, what was a Stathis
Staphosporins,
who,
John Getz,
yeah,
yeah.
he was like just a real toxic kind of male character, but he ends up kind of being this unlikely hero at the end with a
Yeah.
shotgun, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was kind of switching things around a little bit, which was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the toxic masculinity thing, especially in 1986, when we didn't even have words for it, is really interesting because not only is Stathis the asshole who saves the day, but does it like he does it badly. He really doesn't help very much. He's the hero in his own mind, though, which actually plays into like it's all the whole character thing is consistent. He's coming to save
Right,
the
right.
day, gets mutilated for his trouble. He does help, but the journey of Seth Brundle emotionally in parallel, or not in parallel, but in direct contrast to Stathis, is that he is a lovely, maybe self-absorbed, awkward nerd who becomes his worst self because of this thing.
Well, yeah, there is some parallels between them, because you see all this. I just watched it last night to kind of refamiliarize myself with it, and it was kind of interesting to see a lot of the stuff was based on like like some of these toxic traits where jealousy, for example. Staff is always jealous of his ex girlfriend's new love, and then you see the Seth character. He basically kind of decides to jump into the teleporter, untested, because he's jealous that Veronica is going back to her old love. And it was interesting how those kind of those actions were kind of responsible for this kind of monster in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about insecurity in strange ways. Seth is introduced to someone who is so confident in his invention because he knows it works. It's almost there. He's not
Right,
expensive. They
right.
leave me alone. Just all those little things that are seeded in. Like he's pretty high on himself, but he genuinely falls in love, and that ruins him.
And I did find it interesting on the jealousy topic too, how just as he, I don't know, somewhere in like the third phase of him transforming, he's like, "Are you jealous that I brought home another woman?" And she's like, "No, I'm not jealous. I'm just really concerned about you."
Yeah. And he's and again, we haven't even
but it's
mentioned Jeff
still a very
Goldblum's
pressing
name.
music.
Yeah.
But it's very Jeff Goldblum, yeah. And yeah, I was just thinking also, just after watching it, how terrific casting that was. I was just his whole insect-like mannerisms and the way he spoke. A lot of I think it's probably his greatest performance, but also, like, if you watch other films, there's part of it is just ingrained in him as an actor as well. Like, he has a very vibrant energy that I think works really well for that character.
Yeah. But Cronenberg does that thing, right? He does it with Irons in Dead Ringers. He does it with Peter Weller in Naked Lunch. He did it previously with Woods in Videodrome and Walking in the Dead Zone. He finds that quality of an actor and pulls it out of them to almost to a place where they themselves seem uncomfortable with it, which I find absolutely fascinating. Like, Goldblum is, he's in amazing shape. He's got no vanity at the same time because he's just covering himself in latex and making himself look like a tumor, and playing someone who is just aware enough of what's happening to him that we can feel it as tragedy rather than as irony. And he's doing all of this while, like, sort of projecting physical and emotional pain. The vulnerability of it is just heartrending, even though you know that he's going to turn on a dime and just the jealous scene, right, where he screams it at her. It's just there the whole time, this tension of who he is and what he's becoming. And yeah, the makeup won the Oscar. Goldblum wasn't even nominated. And I remember at the time people were upset about that there was the expectation that it was going to be the first genre performance in decades to be nominated for a serious awards consideration. And of course it didn't happen because I don't think the Academy saw it.
Of the period, yeah. And I mean, today it might happen. I mean, I think it's one of the best for sure. It's just it's very moving, and he's a very likable character too. Even though he has this, he's very. I feel like I know people like that, and at a party, and that are talking about their projects too much. I do it myself, and but yeah, he's a very likable character, even after turning into like such a just such an awful kind of creature and character. But yeah, I think they cut a few parts out, didn't they? That maybe made his character a little less sympathetic. I think there was
the monkey cat, right, where he just.
So what happened? I haven't seen that. So
oh wow, I don't know that it's ever surfaced anywhere. There's some test footage on one of the Blu-rays, but I don't think the monkey cat scene was ever really completed. There was like a rough version that was screened for the studio, but it never made it into the finished film. So he combines the surviving monkey, which just disappears in the course of the first finished film. We never see the monkey again. He mentions something about how he's sorry he teleported and murdered his brother.
Right, okay.
And it's a successful test, and we never see him again. I think there might be a line of dialogue about having him sent off for tests or something to make sure he's still intact.
Okay.
But what happened in the assembly cut, I guess we can call it, what happened in the test version was that he was already heavily mutating, and Brundle puts the monkey and a cat that he captures, an alley cat, outside his lab. He puts them in together in an attempt to figure out what happens if you gene splice with live subjects, and it's an abomination, and he beats it to death. It sounds absolutely horrific. And
so it's like an animal torture kind of thing. I could see why that wouldn't play well with test audiences.
Yeah, and it's a way of demonstrating just how far gone he already is, that he thinks this is going to work, and maybe be helpful, that he's torturing and being he's being cruel and torturing something else, or creating something that he then has to kill, as a sort of a telegraphing of where he's going.
Right.
But if
it is tricky with a character like that makes such a traumatic kind of arc and turns to this dark side. Like, how can you still see the good in what he's going through? But
yeah, it was a step too far. There was a scene where he murders a homeless woman who I don't know that that was ever filmed. It's in the script.
Right, I heard
She's
that.
referred to as a bag lady. I think it was, I mean, you know, the vernacular of the age. Um, and he finds someone and either they provoke him in some strange, insulting way, or he just goes full insect and murders her. Just it's the first time you see the caustic vomit being used on a person. It would have been a very elaborate effect. I think they maybe even shot it, but it was never. It was also never included in an assembly in a version screened for audiences. And it's the scene after. It's either the scene after Ronnie leaves or and tells him she's going to get an abortion, or it's two scenes earlier. But it definitely precedes the line "I'll hurt you if you stay." It's using the audience's knowledge of what we've seen to inform the future. But I think it's something he can't come back from as a character. He's no longer sympathetic if he's running around murdering people.
Right, right.
And the genius of cutting, the accidental genius of cutting the monkey cat scene is that when at the very end, when Brundle says, like, let's all be one person, let's you, me, and the baby will be the ultimate family. It's fucking terrifying because we have no idea what that's going to look like.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I was the one thing I actually found out today because I guess I hadn't realized the one problem I always I mean, I think this film is a masterpiece, but and I don't have any criticism really, but though I do feel like the end is very abrupt and it kind of ends in the middle of an action kind of sequence. And yeah, I kind of felt like it would be nice to go back to the pregnancy issue, or have just a meditative image to end with regarding that. But I found it very interesting that there was a alternative ending that with where she dreams of her child as a butterfly coming out of a chrysalis. And I watched it, and I can see why they cut it, because it was pretty. I mean, it was a stop motion animation, and it was a bit clunky and didn't really match with some of the other puppetry and stuff. But I actually cut, like, myself, I kind of like the idea of it if they could have done it well, but
yeah,
I can see why it was cut.
Yeah, no, there's a poetry to it, narratively as well as visually. The idea of dreaming of a better future, or some element of him that survives. But I think
a bit of a space odyssey kind of final image.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the movie he made deserves to leave people just ruined. Like, there's something so powerful about him making a film about, like, ultimately it's the metaphor for his father's cancer. I don't think he could conceive of tacking a happy ending onto it, right? So even if he tried.
Makes sense. Yeah, just cutting the black and just feeling let that feeling continue. I think actually I read that the scene where David Cronenberg delivers her maggot child, that dream sequence, which is awesome. I think that was originally written in possibly to be the ending, but they moved it earlier for dramatic effect. Because I think a lot of movies at the time kind of ended with a sizzle,
the sting like that, where you're just left with another monster. But again,
I'm definitely glad they didn't do that for sure.
Yeah, it would cheapen the suffering somehow. Like, it's the thing that is so powerful about this is that it is just a chamber piece. There are three main characters. There's a couple of other people who turn up, but they don't count. Tawny she's a diversion for Brundle, and that's her function as a plot. Like, that's as close as it comes, I think, to an exploitation movie, where there's a little nudity, there's a little sex, there's a little sizzle, and then it's like, nope, that's not what I care about. Get her out. She leaves. She's safe.
Right. Yeah. That's another thing that's interesting compared to other horror films of the time, at least. But this is just how much of a romance it was. I mean, like, Cronenberg always, he always seems to play with sexual themes, but this was very interesting. I mean, it almost kind of felt like a fairly, something in the kind of Phantom of the Opera or Beauty and the Beast or something, where
Yeah.
there's this gothic horror element and a real romance plot line. And I mean, I read that he kind of just saw it as a realistic love movie with the good, the bad, the surreal, all of the blemishes. It was it wasn't your typical Hollywood love story that is just a total fairy tale. And that's something I kind of, making the Tin Can, the film we just finished, or that's coming out, is just I did relate in that way, because I was kind of making a breakup story, almost a love story just told in reverse. And it's something I think about a lot, because it's not so much nowadays, but you see a lot of relationship stories that are just unbelievable. And this is kind of a believable relationship story told in a very fantasy, medium, which is kind of interesting.
And of course, it's featuring a real couple, which is even more
Is that
painful to
right?
watch. Oh yeah, yeah, they were
Okay,
together.
because my mother had her favorite movie was Earth Girls Are Easy, and she'd be playing that all the time, and yeah, I related quite early that they were the same. Like, I was like, is this the sequel, or what's going on?
Yeah, no,
Okay, that makes sense.
they got together on an absolutely terrible comedy called Transylvania 65000, which was it was god awful. It was like a throwback to the 30s and 40s Abbott and Costello goofballs and monsters pictures, and I want to say it was made in '84. And it started Ed Begley Jr. and Goldblum as a couple of wacky reporters who end up in a town full of monsters, and she was either a real Davis either played a real vampire or someone who wore fake teeth and dressed up sexy to be a Vampirella sort of character. And I saw that in the theater because I had no childhood. I just kept going to the Eaton Center.
This was before The Fly.
Yeah, this would have been a couple of years earlier. And so by the time Cronenberg cast them, they were already a couple. I think Goldblum was cast first. I know that John Lithgow was originally offered the part, but
really?
Right after Garp, I think, was when it was going to happen, because Cronenberg was supposed to. There's this whole alternate universe where David Cronenberg makes Total Recall instead, and because he was on that in the early '80s. In 1983, he was supposed to do it with Richard Dreyfuss. A far less actiony version. It was a much more like cerebral picture.
I've read some of the script. It was interesting. I can see why maybe it wasn't made, but I would have loved to see it. Yeah.
Oh, I've never read it. I'll have to go find it.
It's available online. I haven't read it all. I've just read pieces, but I imagine it would I don't know, it'd be would have been somewhere like akin to David Lynch's Dune or something like that. That's what I imagine, but
right.
Which a lot of people didn't like, but I personally kind of liked it. I did really like it.
Yeah, it's got, especially in contrast to Villeneuve's film, which I admire but don't actually enjoy. I like watching Lynch just mess around and try to figure out what it is he's dealing with in this gigantic machinery.
Oh yeah.
But the idea of Cronenberg doing a sci-fi action movie right after Scanners, which is, I think, how it was supposed to go. Or Scanners is why he got the offer. And Lithgow was in there somewhere. Maybe he was the villain. I'm not totally sure. I don't know I know the roles weren't the same, but he wouldn't have been the Michael Ironside equivalent, I don't think. Maybe the Ronnie Cox, but he was probably part of it. And then that didn't happen. So he was going to do The Fly, or at least he was offered The Fly, but he said he didn't want to work with the prosthetics and it was too gruesome and he didn't want to make horror movies. So Goldblum comes, and I think that's how Davis gets wind of it. And the two of them together are they're playing the nightmare version of their own relationship. They're a reasonably new couple. They're deeply in love and they are losing each other on camera. And it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. Cool. Well, that makes a lot of sense. They're both very good.
I've never
some great deliveries too. just some of those lines, they're just actually, when I was watching it today, I noticed that line. What was it? Be afraid, be very afraid. I always pictured that was an old Vincent Price line, and I realized it originated with The Fly. Actually, it's just been recycled in The Simpsons and all the, in pop culture so much that
Yeah, it's been absorbed. It's been assimilated.
Tell where it came from, but yeah, that was their tagline, or
it was the poster copy. Yeah. I had a poster for years, probably in an unhealthy position of worship on my wall. It's such a great image and such an unnerving, simple tease. You can't see what's inside, but it's not right. And I mean, it's the box art. It's never changed. It's always been that simple.
No, it's a great cover.
Yeah. And it was in the trailer too. Be afraid, be very afraid. And the thing that's amazing about that line is that Davis just throws it away. She's not selling it. Nobody knew it was the tagline. It's part of the film.
Yeah, it's not super heavy. I read today that it was that Mel Brooks actually thought of that line. He was the producer, I believe, and he just threw that line at David. She should be afraid, and it kind of stuck. So,
I didn't know that. That's great. Brooks is a godfather of auteurist directors is something nobody really talks about. But he made The Elephant Man for Lynch after seeing
right
Eraserhead, and he produced The Fly because he liked, I think, The Dead Zone, but I'm not totally sure. I don't know how that relationship started, and they only ever made one movie together.
Well, it was he's not credited, and I think it's probably because he really had the Mel Brooks package, and it would be a little confusing to see his name on The Fly. But
yeah, it was just his production company, Brooks Films. But Stuart Kornfeld, I think, was his guy.
Well, I heard that Cronenberg wrote a sequel, whether you call it a sequel or it's I think it was like a kind of a sequel, but not a traditional type of sequel. But Brooks wasn't interested in doing it because it was too far away from the Fly format. So,
yeah, I mean, anything that follows is going to feel alien, right? Because you can't replicate they try, like Chris Walas tried, the makeup artist for the first film who directed the second, The Fly 2.
Okay.
He tried. Have you seen it? It's not good.
I did see it when I was a kid. I haven't watched it in a while. I remember it was kind of, they leaned a little harder into like the barf attacks, and
yeah,
we got a little bit more exploitation film.
Yeah, it's more effectsy, but also it tries to replicate the sense of claustrophobia and limited the world of the story the same way the first film does. And you can just feel it not working because the chemistry, like the alchemy of having Goldblum and Davis together, with the occasional intrusion by John Getz or Ronnie going out and seeing Stathis and all those other ways that it breaks it up, because Seth doesn't interact with anybody else. He's such a hermit in the story, in the narrative, that when he goes outside, it's jarring even before he starts to deteriorate. That moment where he crashes into the OBGYN clinic is such an invasion of that world in so many ways. But one of them I keep coming back to is like, I've never seen this person under fluorescent light, and it's terrifying. He's really alien in that space. By the time he gets there, he's mutated so much that he's almost unrecognizable as a person, except for the eyes. And it's so shattering because, and I'm, again, when you see it with a crowd, like they're already unnerved because there were not a lot of gynecologist scenes in movies in the 80s. I think Cronenberg is responsible for something like 90% of them between The Fly and Dead Ringers.
Right. Yeah.
And people were just like off. They felt the tension. And even though it's safe and quiet space, it's not right. They were not processing the scene as calming. And then Brundle shows up and it just becomes this absolute nightmare.
Well, I mean, I think everyone on a very, on the, just a very simple basis of, old age, that kind of metaphor, dying of a disease. That I think a lot of people that resonates with people because you're we as people are always being kind of stalked by death, and it's there. You can't. It's like the end.
Yeah.
It's coming for you, whether it's the Terminator, So
Yeah.
that part, I can see, just because it's so baked in. For me though, I like kind of read this movie. It's like the what I kind of relate to is just I'm a reclusive person. I do. I'm very focused on my work, and just the reclusive workaholic kind of syndrome, and almost being consumed by work and transformed by it to, often not for better. And that's something that happens with me when I'm, making a film. It's just very all encompassing, and I kind of feel like I turn into a monster and make poor decisions. So I don't know. I can kind of see like an autobiographical element for Cronenberg when he's making this, possibly, but no.
I
But that's
wonder.
how I relate to it.
I never thought of it as an allegory for artists, but you're absolutely right. I mean, he's doing something that will change the world and infect potentially people in a weird way, which is what art, I mean, it's at its best version, it's what art does, because you never let it go. You carry it with you forever. But the hubris is what undermines him. So I don't know. It's more of a Michael Bay thing than an actual artist thing, I suppose, in the end.
Michael Bay.
That wasn't fair.
Actually, I heard that Michael Bay was Fox wanted him to direct the sequel. That would have been a bad choice. Sorry, Michael Bay, but
I heard Del Toro was offered, but passed
Right.
because he just couldn't imagine doing something that had the same emotional impact.
Well,
I can't imagine Michael Bay's reason.
Yeah, I'm still holding out for that David Cronenberg will do his sequel someday. We'll see.
Yeah, I wonder. I never saw the opera, which apparently has different elements that could be carried forward. I remember when he talked about the sequel, the one time he alluded to the opera being the gateway. That was what led him see that there was another way to do it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But, yeah.
I don't know much about the opera. Is it I thought there was like a Broadway show of it or something, but it was an opera.
Yeah, I think it was in Germany or Italy. It was definitely never performed in Canada, because I would have found a way to go. A Broadway version of The Fly would be a nightmare.
Yeah. Now that I say that, I'm like, what are you talking about?
It's like a Simpsons parody of itself already.
Yeah. But opera makes a lot more sense because it is a very operatic movie, in a way. Even the music, I just, like you said, it's very symphonic, very, very much like Howard Shore kind of stuff. Has a very mysterious kind of undertone, but it kind of like it. I found the soundtrack really transforms like the character does. Like the first half of the movie is, you almost like you're feeling like this romance sax or French horn in these scenes, and then the music like slowly gets more dissonant and music less musical in some ways, and more and in the pace kind of changes and more symphonic, and I found that pretty interesting and really effective. It's not my favorite soundtrack by him, but I do find it's like a perfect soundtrack.
Yeah.
And like in the opening it's very beautiful, and just the image of whatever, I don't even know what we're looking at, but it looks like, to me, it's like a pixelized view of what the view of a fly might look like. But it's a shot of people as well, and they kind of look like insects. So I don't know if I'm looking at insects or looking at people through the eyes of an insect.
Yeah, it's incredibly off-putting, right? And then it resolves into a party, which shot at the AGO, which is, I think that cool. Section of it is still there. It's the reception hall in the center with the pillars. And every time I walk through there, I'm just like, nothing good can come from this place.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I mean, for me, a party is quite terrifying as an introvert, but
yeah, I'm always convinced that people would rather be talking to someone else, but I enjoy standing around with a drink in my hand. It's a nice image. It's what one cultivates of oneself.
That's true. Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure we talked about Tin Can and the way that does tie into The Fly, but also in the ways that it doesn't, which is that it is a film about isolation and communication in so many ways, which The Fly also is. But as you say, it's a romance that runs in reverse. So it's something else to deal with. I don't even know how to discuss it in audio terms in a way that people can understand it. But I think we should, I'm assuming you want to preserve the surprise and where it goes and what it becomes.
Yeah, I'm not too precious about it, really. I mean, if talking about it is less intrusive in a way than trailers for me. I'm not a fan of trailers.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
find trailers are just like it's like a visual synopsis, and it's kind of just it takes the wind out of it. But discussing things, it's you're not seeing them, so I'm totally cool with whatever.
Yeah. Okay. I don't watch trailers because I don't want the information. Like, I just don't want images
Yeah.
in my head that I'm eventually going to have to connect to the film. It's like, well, this guy can't die because I've seen 3 shots of him in different situations that haven't happened yet. It's like time travel. I don't want to know.
I mean, I generally like the idea of trailers because they tell you if you want to see the movie or not, if you can get a sense of that. But over the last, I don't know, 15 years or whatever it's been, they've just gone off the deep end. Like the Netflix trailers literally just last for 7 minutes or so.
What struck me about Tin Can watching it is that the characters themselves are changing, but the movie is also taking a new form. The movie is the Brundlefly in this case.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. I'll use that.
I mean, was that always the idea going in to do something that just becomes a different thing?
Well, I definitely, I was very interested in transformation, and I knew I was making a kind of a person in a box type story, and partly that came from budgetary reasons, but I kind of like the restrictions it would bring, and with restrictions, you start generating a lot of ideas because how am I going to make this interesting for the 45 minutes this person's in a small 3x5 tin can. Well, you have to get creative about what you do with that space, and it was very organic when we were coming up with this thing. At the very beginning, when I was writing this with my co-writer Darcy Speidel, it was all going to take place in that thing, and then we started thinking about space and imprisonment and how it could change, and prisons within prisons, and how small can a prison be, and I think that's kind of where the suit came from, and just decided it would be a lot more interesting if, instead of this being the typical imprisonment film within like a coffin or something, if half of the movie or a large part was on the outside, and is that any better, so
yeah, I mean, it's very effective from the perspective of someone who had no idea where it was going. And
oh, good.
I interviewed Anna for the for Now's Rising Screen Stars issue. I guess it would have been 2019, and she just shot it, I think. Is that right? Did you shoot it in the fall of 2018?
We shot it early 2019, before the pandemic.
Yeah, so she must have just been going to do it, but she was so high on the idea of something that just needed her. Like, that was how she pitched it. It's like, it's going to be me doing this. And she was really excited. And I saw the film. It's like, yeah, that's it. She's the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot there. and you really need a certain type of actor for that as well. Mm-hmm. But then, I mean, there was actually a large part of the film wasn't her. I mean, it is her as a character, but it was with our body double, Kristen Langell, and some of our other, there's like a segment of the film where it's kind of like a silent movie. I mean, I like that. It's not for everyone, but it's a whole different method of acting, and it's a whole different experience as well.
Yeah, it was really striking. I think it works, and I hope people see it, because that's our job collectively to get people's attention on the stuff that deserves the time. And yeah, then after that, they should go pick up The Fly and just take another look at it. It's on Disney
Yes.
Plus in Canada, which I find
Wow.
absolutely bizarre.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's sort of a duet. You don't need The Fly 2, but I think Tin Can and The Fly will play well together.
Yeah, I'd say it's a good companion piece. It's a good, yep. They both share some. Actually, his son Brandon Cronenberg was a script editor on Tin Can.
Oh, nice! I didn't know that.
Yeah, we met at TIFF during the Crescent, and we had just been talking. And whenever I'm writing a script, it's a tricky question. Like, who can I bounce this off of? That's gonna have who's like-minded enough to understand what I'm going for, but also be able to have some criticism, and he was pretty open to it and gave us some great ideas, and so that was kind of interesting. That was nice for me. I love his films though, Brandon, and I just watched Possessor again recently, and I think he was shooting that while we were shooting Tin Can. So
yeah, that makes sense.
He stole my assistant director actually, because it's a guy I like working with, but he works with him every time. So I was like, but yeah, Possessor was a beautiful movie.
Yeah, Possessor has similar DNA too, to not The Fly, but to Tin Can. They're both films about depersonalization and loss of self in really, really different ways. But they also have these, I hate the phrase avant-garde, but they have experimental sequences built in which challenge the audience for the genre. And in both cases, I think they land pretty well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, I think, that's definitely a great movie. And you just, you come up with a topic and you just try to explore it from every angle and see where it takes you. I really do find that films are kind of these organic beings that just kind of tell you what they want to be, and you just kind of have to follow. Even after they're finished, they're still alive. It's been amazing to me with Tin Can how we shot this before the pandemic, but as we've been going through this whole COVID phase, it's really changed the meaning in a lot of ways. We go from, this movie's kind of about being trapped. You're talking to people over the phone. You're not, it's like a radio play, and it's about quarantine, but now it's like, to me, it's kind of more about there's this disease that's always stalking you, but it's like you have to kind of live with it. So it's been interesting how the movie's aging and changing as it ages very quickly.
Yeah, it's not that the times have caught up with it. It's that it's probably got a couple of things that we still haven't hit yet.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the fungal pandemic. So we'll see how we do with that.
It's coming. I'm sure it's coming. I'll miss mushrooms. Yeah, I'll miss mushrooms on spaghetti, but some sacrifices must be made.
Absolutely.
My thanks to Seth Smith, whose personal Brundlefly Tin Can, starring friend of the show Anna Hopkins, is now available on VOD from Level Film. Thanks also to Laura Steen. She knows what she did. You can find Seth on Twitter at STH_SMTH. And you can find The Fly on Blu-ray in Shout Factory's Fly Collection, a 5-disc set that also includes The Fly 2, and the 3 original 20th Century Fox movies from the 50s. The earlier Fox Home Entertainment discs are still out there too, and it's also available to stream on Disney Plus in Canada, I wasn't kidding, and on Crave and Amazon with the Stars package. In the US, it's on Prime Video. You can also find it for rental or purchase on most VOD platforms. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. And if you missed the announcement last episode, I've made the first year of the podcast available for download, just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 46 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. Great guests, great films. If you like the show the way it is now, here's a chance to find out how we got here. The full track list is just a click away at payhip.com/Semcast. And that's the episode. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe. Watch movies. Wear a mask if you go out. Get your booster when you can. I'll see you next time.